Hello, dear friends. Please join me as we listen to today's story. In this house, I'm the one who makes the rules. My stepmother sneered in the middle of the family gathering, then pointed straight at Tyler, her son, a big martial artist who had been training for 10 years. You need that money to save the daughter of the fellow soldier who sacrificed himself to save you, don't you? Fine. Fight Tyler for 1 round. If you win, I'll sign. Tyler stood up, slowly pulled on his gloves, and smiled as if the victory already belonged to him. My stepmother called the whole family outside to watch, certain that her son was about to humiliate me. What she didn't know was that the little girl lying in the hospital was the daughter of the soldier who had used his own body to shield me 8 years earlier. I didn't step onto that mat to prove I was stronger than Tyler. I stepped onto it because of a debt I had carried home from the battlefield. When the bell rang, Tyler was still smiling. 5 seconds later, that smile was gone. My name is Scarlett Hayes. I'm 34 years old, and when I returned to Ohio, I had 8 years of service in the United States Army behind me. People often think coming home means everything is over. For me, it only meant I no longer had to put on a uniform every morning. Some things still came home with me. I had served as a combat medic. My job wasn't to be the strongest person on the team. It was to keep the person beside me alive long enough to get them out of danger. I learned how to work when my hands were shaking from exhaustion, how to hear someone calling for their mother through the chaos, and how to keep moving even when every part of me wanted to sit down. During those 8 years, there was one man I never truly left behind. Sergeant Marcus Reed. Marcus was a few years older than me. He was from Kentucky, spoke slowly, and always carried a picture of his little girl in his pocket. Emma was only 2 at the time. Whenever we had a break, Marcus would pull out that picture, wipe the dust from the plastic covering, and tell us how she loved star-shaped pancakes and insisted that her dad read her the same book every night over video. I still remember his face on his last day. Our convoy was ambushed while moving through an area we had been told was secure. Everything happened too fast. The noise, the dust, voices shouting over the radio. I had barely crouched beside a wounded soldier when Marcus came rushing toward me. After that, my memories exist only in pieces. Something hit me hard and drove me to the ground. Marcus was between me and the danger. When I woke up, I had been evacuated. Marcus had not. 8 years have passed, but some nights I can still feel his hand pushing down on my shoulder, and I can still hear the last words he said through all that chaos. Go home, Scarlett. I did. He didn't. I didn't meet Marcus's family right away. Part of it was because of my duties. Part of it was because I didn't know how to stand in front of his wife and daughter without feeling as though I had come home carrying something that should have belonged to him. Then, one morning in Ohio, I received a message from an old friend from my unit. Emma Reed was at Cincinnati Children's. I read the name 3 times. Emma was 10 years old now. She was being treated for a serious illness, and the treatment her doctors recommended cost far more than the family's insurance would cover. The number at the bottom of the information sheet left me sitting motionless for a long time. I looked at the picture of Marcus that I still kept on my phone. 8 years earlier, he hadn't hesitated when I needed a chance to make it home. Now his daughter needed a chance. And this time, I knew I wasn't going to stand by and watch. The news about Emma forced me to stop putting off something I had been avoiding for more than a year. My father, Daniel Hayes, had died 18 months earlier from a heart attack in his home in Beaver Creek. At the time, I was still serving in the military. I made it back to Ohio only 2 days before his funeral, still carrying an unopened duffel bag and the feeling that I had missed far too much during the final years of his life. My father wasn't wealthy in the way people usually think of wealth. He didn't own luxury cars or vacation homes in Florida. He ran a small medical supply company in Dayton, lived modestly, drove the same Ford for nearly 10 years, and always believed money only had value when it was used at the right time. After he died, I learned that he had established a trust for me. The money came from his savings, life insurance, and several investments he had held for years. Under the original terms, I would have full control when I turned 35. I wasn't there yet. Because I had frequently been away on military duty when the documents were prepared, my father had named Diane, his second wife, as the temporary trustee. I had never objected. At the time, I thought it was only a formality. Diane had been with my father for nearly 12 years. She knew his attorney, his bank accounts, and every document in his safe. We were never close, but I had also never believed I needed to protect myself from her. Until Emma needed money. That afternoon, I sat in my car outside a coffee shop in Dayton, looking again at the amount the hospital had sent Marcus's family. I had savings, but not enough. I could take out a loan. I could sell my car. I could gather smaller amounts from different places, but all of that would take time. Emma didn't have that kind of time. My father's trust had enough. I called Diane. She didn't answer the first time. She finally picked up on the third call. I kept my explanation brief. I didn't tell her everything about Marcus. I only said that I needed an early distribution of part of the money that belonged to me so I could help cover treatment costs for the daughter of an old friend from the military. Diane was quiet for a long time. Then she said she would have to review the documents. I waited 2 days. On the third day, she texted me that the terms of the trust did not allow an early withdrawal without the trustee's signature. I already knew that. I asked whether she would sign. She didn't answer. That evening, I called again. This time, Diane was direct. No. One word. No explanation. I sat in my rented apartment in Dayton, watching the screen of my phone go dark in my hand. I had heard harder answers in my life. I had listened to doctors tell us that a soldier wasn't going to make it. I had called families for men and women who could no longer call home themselves. But Diane's no made me angry in a different way, because that money wasn't hers. I called the attorney who had handled my father's will. He confirmed that Diane did have the authority to reject an early distribution unless I could prove a special circumstance serious enough to take before a court. Court meant time. Emma didn't have time. 2 days later, Diane called me. She said the whole family would be gathering at the house Sunday evening to celebrate her son Tyler's birthday. If I wanted to discuss the trust, I could come. I didn't like the way she said it, but I went anyway. The house in Beaver Creek was where I had grown up. My father bought it when I was in high school. I still remembered how the third wooden stair always creaked when someone stepped on it. I remembered the old dining table where my father used to sit and read the newspaper every morning. That night, when I walked inside, the house hardly felt like his anymore. My father's picture had been moved from the mantel to a small shelf in the corner. The walls were covered with photographs of Diane and Tyler. Tyler at graduation, Tyler at an amateur tournament, Tyler holding up a medal beside a coach. There were about 20 people in the house, Diane's relatives, Tyler's friends, a few neighbors. I understood immediately that this was not going to be a private conversation. Diane waited until after dinner to bring up the money. She sat at the head of the table, where my father used to sit. I said nothing about it. I simply placed Emma's hospital paperwork in front of her and explained that I wasn't asking for the entire trust. I only needed enough for Emma's family to begin the treatment her doctors had recommended. Diane casually flipped through a few pages. Then she closed the file. She didn't ask what illness Emma had. She didn't ask who Marcus was. She didn't ask why any of it mattered to me. She simply looked at me and said I had always believed I could come back from the military and expect everyone else to change their plans for me. I didn't answer. A few people around the table began to go quiet. Tyler was sitting several chairs away from me. He was 31, nearly a head taller than I was, broad-shouldered, and had a habit of leaning back whenever someone else spoke, as though nothing happening in the room was important enough for him to take seriously. Tyler had been training in martial arts since college. For the past 10 years, he had competed in amateur events around Ohio and Kentucky. Diane talked about it every chance she got. She was proud of her son. There was nothing wrong with that. What was wrong was that she believed Tyler's abilities gave her the right to look down on everyone else. I tried one last time. I told her I didn't want to argue. I only needed her signature. Diane laughed. Not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh a person gives when they realize they're holding something someone else desperately needs. She stood up. In this house, I'm the one who makes the rules. The entire table went quiet. Diane turned toward Tyler, then pointed at me. You need that money to save the daughter of the fellow soldier who sacrificed himself to save you, don't you? I looked at her. That was when I realized she had read everything I had sent. She knew. She simply didn't care. Diane continued. Fine. Fight Tyler for 1 round. If you win, I'll sign. For a moment, I thought I had heard her wrong. A few people laughed because they assumed she was joking. Tyler didn't. He looked at his mother, then at me. A few seconds later, he stood up. Diane had a fairly large backyard. Tyler often trained there whenever he came home. The garage held gloves, training pads, and several interlocking mats. 10 minutes later, nearly everyone from the house had moved outside. Some brought chairs. Some held beers. One of Diane's relatives even set up a phone on a small stand to record everything. I stood at the edge of the mat and looked at the scene in front of me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. I had once believed people only turned someone else's pain into entertainment when they didn't understand it. That night, I learned that sometimes they understood perfectly. They just didn't care. Tyler pulled on a pair of black gloves. He rolled his shoulders, bounced on his feet a few times, then smiled at the friends standing nearby. He was completely confident. I didn't blame him for that. From the outside, I understood why. I was under 5'7". I hadn't been out of the army very long. My shoulders were much smaller than Tyler's. My left knee still ached on cold days, and I no longer trained the way I had while serving. Tyler saw a 34-year-old woman who needed money. He didn't see the 8 years behind me. I took off my watch. I placed my phone on the table beside the yard. Then I stepped onto the mat. No one was laughing loudly anymore. One of Tyler's friends stood between us and explained a few rules. No strikes to dangerous areas. No continuing after the other person had submitted. I only heard half of it. In my mind, I could see Emma lying in that hospital bed. And Marcus, 8 years earlier. I wasn't stepping onto that mat to prove a soldier was better than a martial artist. I wasn't doing it because Diane had insulted me, either. If this had only been about pride, I would have walked away long ago. I stepped onto that mat because a 10-year-old girl had nothing to do with any of the people standing around that yard. The bell sounded from a phone. Tyler moved toward me immediately. He was faster than I expected, but his confidence made him rush. I didn't try to match his strength head-on. I simply moved at the right moment and let his own momentum pull him off balance. A moment later, I had control of his movement and took Tyler down before he even understood what had happened. There was no heavy blow, no blood, no screaming, just a dull thud when Tyler's back hit the mat. I held him there just long enough for everyone to understand that the match was over. Then I let him go. 5 seconds, maybe less. I got to my feet first. Tyler stayed down for another moment, staring up at the dark sky above the backyard as though he were trying to piece together the 5 seconds that had just disappeared from his mind. No one said anything. The person recording lowered the phone. One of Tyler's friends was still holding a beer halfway to his mouth, but had forgotten to drink it. I looked toward Diane. The smile was gone from her face. She stood beside the back door, both arms rigid at her sides. For the first time since I had walked into that house, Diane no longer looked like someone who controlled everything. I reached down toward Tyler. He stared at my hand for a few seconds, then took it. I pulled him to his feet. Then I turned toward his mother. I didn't celebrate. I didn't mock him. I didn't talk about my 8 years in the military. I simply looked at Diane and waited for her to fulfill the only part of the agreement that actually mattered. Her signature. For several seconds, no one in the backyard spoke. Tyler stood beside me, still breathing hard, tugging one glove back into place where it had shifted around his wrist. He didn't look at me anymore. The confidence he'd had before was gone, but I didn't see anger on his face, only the confusion of a man who had just realized he had badly underestimated his opponent. I stepped off the mat, picked up the hospital documents from the wooden table beside the back door, and handed them to Diane. I did my part. Diane didn't take them right away. She looked at Tyler first, then at everyone standing around the yard. Maybe what bothered her most wasn't that her son had lost. It was that so many people had witnessed it. 10 minutes earlier, this had been a show she had staged to humiliate me. Now no one was laughing. Finally, Diane snatched the papers out of my hand. I watched her turn to the page that required the trustee's approval. A pen was lying on the table. I pushed it toward her. Diane looked at the pen, then she did something I hadn't expected. She grabbed both ends of the paper and tore it in half. The sound was quiet, but in that silent backyard, I heard every rip. Diane tore it again. Then again. Pieces of paper fell onto the table. I never had any intention of signing. I stood still. I had dealt with people who broke their word before. I had worked in places where promises could change the moment a phone call ended. But this was different. Diane had used a child receiving treatment in a hospital as the prize in her own little game. That was no longer simple coldness. It was something else. I looked down at the torn pieces of paper. I didn't yell. I didn't step toward her. I didn't give her the reaction she seemed to be waiting for. Diane tilted her head, almost disappointed that I wasn't reacting. "I'll get the money another way," I said. I picked up my phone and my watch. Then I went back inside. Behind me, I heard a few people begin speaking quietly. Tyler called his mother's name, but Diane answered quickly and in a low voice. I couldn't make out all of it. I didn't stop. In the living room, My father's picture was still sitting on that small shelf in the corner. I stood in front of it for a few seconds. When my father was alive, no one in this house would have dared turn someone else's pain into a wager. I didn't know what he would have thought if he had seen what had just happened, but I knew one thing. I couldn't spend another night there. I drove toward Dayton without any real plan. The apartment I had rented was having plumbing repairs done, and the landlord had asked the tenants to stay somewhere else for a few days. Normally, I could have called an old friend from my unit. I could have found a better hotel. But at that moment, all I wanted was a place with a door I could lock. I stopped at a small motel near Interstate 675. Several bulbs were burned out on the red sign by the road. The front desk sat behind thick glass. The man working the night shift handed me a room key without really looking up. Room 214. One bed, one small table. An air conditioner that sounded like it was about to fall out of the wall. I put my bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. Only then did I look at my phone. 17 notifications. 3 missed calls. 2 messages from relatives I only saw a few times a year. The first asked if I was all right. The second wasn't nearly as kind. I opened social media. Diane had gotten there before me. She hadn't posted the video. Not yet. She had only written a short post saying that Tyler's birthday gathering had been ruined by an unfortunate incident, and that a family member who had recently returned from the military had overreacted and attacked Tyler in his own home. Not one line mentioned the agreement. Not one line said Diane had called Tyler out to fight me. Not one line mentioned that nearly 20 people had stood around the yard watching the match. I read the post twice, then the comments started appearing. One person said combat trauma could make people unpredictable. Another wrote that Diane needed to be careful. Someone even asked whether I should be allowed around children if I was that out of control. I put the phone down. It wasn't the comments that chilled me. It was how quickly they appeared. Less than 2 hours after the match, an entirely different story had already been created. I didn't need years of military experience to recognize what that meant. When a lot of people start repeating the same story too quickly, it usually means someone prepared that story ahead of time. I opened the video one of Tyler's friends had sent me right after the match. The footage started with the two of us already standing on the mat. It didn't include Diane challenging me. It didn't include her promise to sign. Just Tyler and me. I watched the 5 seconds, then I watched them again. From that camera angle, if someone cut the footage in exactly the right place, everything could look very different. Tyler moved toward me. I restrained him. He went down. No context, no reason. Just a female veteran, taking a man to the ground in his own backyard. I sat up straighter. An uneasy feeling began to form. Diane hadn't simply wanted me to lose. If her only goal had been to embarrass me, she would have been angry when Tyler went down. But I remembered her face during those first few seconds after the match. She had gone pale. Not because Tyler was hurt. He was barely hurt at all. She had looked toward the phones. I got up, closed the motel curtains, and checked the lock. Old habit. Not fear. Just checking my surroundings. Around 11 o'clock, I received a message from my father's attorney. He had seen Diane's post. He advised me not to respond publicly to anything and to preserve every picture, message, and video. That was exactly what I did. Downloaded everything. Sent copies to my personal email. Recorded the time and the name of each sender. Small things. But small things helped quiet my mind. Near midnight, I turned off the light. I hadn't been asleep long when someone knocked on the door. 3 knocks. Slow. Even. My eyes opened immediately. The clock on the table read 12:37 a.m. No one knew I was there except the attorney and the man at the front desk. The knocking came again. I didn't turn on the light. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Tyler was standing in the hallway. Alone. He had changed clothes. No gloves. No friends. None of the confidence he had carried onto the mat just a few hours earlier. I opened the door but left the security latch in place. "What do you want?" Tyler glanced both ways down the hallway. "We need to talk." I didn't open the door any farther. He held up something small. A black USB drive. "I'm not here to start trouble." I looked at it, then at him. Tyler swallowed. "My mother wanted you to hit me from the beginning." That was enough for me to undo the lock. I still didn't invite him inside right away. Tyler stood outside the door and gave me the short version. 2 days before the party, Diane had called him over to the house. She told him I was coming to ask for money and that she wanted to teach me a lesson. She told Tyler to challenge me, make me angry, and get me to react in front of everyone. At first, Tyler thought it was only meant to humiliate me. He agreed. But that night, after I left, Tyler overheard Diane talking on the phone with a man she called Martin, an attorney. I opened the door all the way. Tyler stepped inside but didn't sit down. He placed the USB drive on the table. "You need to see this." I plugged it into the laptop I had brought with me. There were only 3 files, 2 videos, 1 audio recording. The first video had been recorded in Diane's garage the previous afternoon. The camera shook slightly, as if a phone had been placed on a shelf. Tyler appeared in the frame. Then Diane. I turned up the volume. Her voice was perfectly clear. She told Tyler not to hit me hard. All he had to do was crowd me, mock my time in the military, bring up Marcus, and remind me of the people I hadn't been able to save. I paused the video. I looked at Tyler. He lowered his head. I didn't know who Marcus was. I continued watching. Diane said that if I tried to walk away, he was supposed to stop me with words. If I lost my temper, even better. If I shoved Tyler first, perfect. And if I actually hit him, everyone was supposed to keep recording. I was no longer watching the video as a stepdaughter being insulted by her stepmother. I was watching it like someone who had spent hours analyzing an incident, looking for the one thing that did not fit. Every detail had a purpose. The guests, the phones, the backyard, Tyler, even Emma's money. It was bait. The second video explained why. Diane was sitting at the dining table with a man I had never seen before. A file folder lay between them. My name was printed in the upper corner. The man said that if they wanted to ask the court to keep restricting my control over the trust after I turned 35, they would need more than testimony claiming I was unstable. They needed a specific incident, specific behavior, a record that could make an attorney question my ability to manage money and control my emotions. Diane answered very calmly. "Then, I'll give you an incident." I paused the video. The motel room suddenly felt very quiet. Tyler stood behind me with his hands in his pockets. I stared at the file on the screen. For the past 18 months, I had always believed Diane simply wanted to hold on to control for a few more months. I had been wrong. She was not waiting for me to reach the age when the trust became mine. She was preparing a reason to make sure I never truly controlled it at all. That night's match had never been about Tyler. It had never been about Diane believing her son was stronger than I was, either. She needed me to lose my temper. She needed me to hit a man on camera. She needed a short video with no beginning, no challenge, no promise. I removed the USB drive from the computer and set it on the table. Tyler looked at me. "I'm sorry. I did not answer right away. Because for the first time since my father died, I understood that the biggest problem was not Diane refusing to sign a piece of paper. The problem was that she had planned in advance to turn my 8 years of military service, the memories I had carried home, and even the fellow soldier who had sacrificed himself into evidence against me. And that night, she thought she had gotten exactly what she needed." Tyler was still standing beside the small table in the motel room, his hands shoved deep into his pockets as though he did not know where else to put them. I looked at the USB drive lying between us. Years in the military had taught me that there were moments when you had to decide very quickly whether the person in front of you was an ally or a threat. But Tyler did not quite look like either one. Not yet. He was the man who had agreed to take part in Diane's plan. He had stepped onto that mat, intending to humiliate me in front of the entire family. If everything had gone the way his mother wanted, Tyler probably would have gone to bed satisfied and never shown up at my motel room. I did not forget that, but I also could not ignore the fact that he had just brought me something capable of destroying his own mother's entire plan. I asked him why. Tyler pulled out the chair, but did not sit down right away. He said that at first Diane had only told him that I had become arrogant after coming home from the military, that I believed I could walk back into my father's house and demand that everyone do what I wanted. She said the match was simply a way to make me realize that I was no longer in control of everything. Tyler believed her, partly because he had always believed his mother, partly because he did not like me either. We had never really had a relationship. Whenever I came back to Ohio during my years on active duty, Tyler usually appeared at only a few family dinners. We greeted each other, exchanged a few words, and went our separate ways. From a distance, I probably looked like someone who was always busy and did not care about the family. From my point of view, Tyler was simply the son Diane never stopped bragging about. Neither one of us had ever tried to understand the other. Tyler finally sat down. He stared at the computer screen, which had already gone dark. "At first, I thought she just wanted to embarrass you." I said nothing. "But after you left, I heard her tell Martin that the video would help keep you away from the trust. That was the first time Tyler said the most important part out loud. He had not come to me because he felt guilty about the match. He had come because he realized he had been used. Tyler said Diane had never explained the full plan to him. She had only told him to make me angry, say a few things about the military, then keep pushing until I reacted. She had arranged for other people to record from 2 different angles. If I walked away, they would say I was erratic. If I lost my temper, they would say I was out of control. If I hit Tyler first, she would have exactly what she needed. The plan had only one problem. I did not do anything she expected. I stepped onto the mat according to the agreement. Tyler made the first move, and I simply ended the match faster than anyone expected. Diane was forced to cut off the beginning. Tyler said he heard his own mother tell one of the relatives to keep only the 5-second clip of me taking him down. Then she called her attorney. That was when Tyler understood this was no longer some family game. I looked at him. "What do you want?" Tyler shook his head. "Nothing." I did not believe him immediately. People rarely turn against their own family without a reason. He was quiet for a moment, then added that if Diane really intended to use that video to take control of my property, he did not want his name in the record as someone who had helped her do it. Maybe that was not remorse yet, but at least it was a line he would not cross. I could work with someone who still knew where his limits were. The next morning, I called Samuel Green. He was my father's longtime attorney, the man who had helped Daniel Hayes establish his company, purchase the house in Beaver Creek, and prepare nearly all of his estate documents before he died. Samuel was in his 60s, and his office was on the 4th floor of an old building near downtown Dayton. I had met him many times when I was younger. My father always said Samuel was the kind of man who read every line of a contract before putting his name on it. If anyone knew how my trust had been structured, it was him. I did not tell him everything over the phone. I only said I had evidence that Diane was trying to use a family incident to extend her control over the trust. Samuel told me to come immediately. Tyler came with me. I was not sure what Samuel thought when the 2 of us walked into his office at 8:15 that morning, less than 12 hours after one of us had put the other on the mat. He did not ask. I handed him the USB drive. Samuel watched all 3 files. He did not interrupt. He did not comment. He only took notes. When the second video ended, he removed his glasses. "How long has she been preparing this?" "I don't know." Samuel looked at Tyler. Tyler shook his head too. Samuel leaned back in his chair. He explained that what Diane was trying to do was not as simple as taking a video into court and saying I was incapable of managing money. But if she could create a pattern of evidence showing that I was unstable, made impulsive decisions, or posed a danger to myself or others, she could ask the court to continue supervising my assets. I understood. It did not mean she was guaranteed to win. She only needed to delay things. 1 year, 2 years, maybe longer. And during that time, Diane would still have access. Samuel stopped on that last word. I understood immediately. Access. He nodded. Then he opened the financial records system. Samuel asked his assistant to bring in the latest statements for the trust. He said Diane was required to provide periodic reports, but some of the recent ones had arrived late and were missing supporting documents. Before this, he had assumed it was carelessness. Now he did not. We began reviewing each transaction. Most looked normal. Taxes, management fees, legal expenses, a few investments that had been moved after my father died. Then Samuel stopped at one transaction. $12,000. 3 months after the funeral. Description: property maintenance expenses. But the trust did not own any property requiring that kind of maintenance. He kept going. $8,500. Then $15,000. Then $6,000. The withdrawals were spaced several weeks apart. Each had a different description. Renovation costs, consulting fees, operating expenses. I watched the list grow across the screen. Samuel stopped taking notes. He began printing. Tyler was standing behind me, and I saw his expression change when one name appeared on the list of recipients. Bennett Performance Group. Tyler stepped closer. "That's my company." I turned toward him. He looked at Samuel. Tyler explained that Bennett Performance Group was the limited liability company he had established 2 years earlier for his gym and his personal training contracts. He had received money from Diane, but he had always believed she was investing her own personal funds. Samuel opened the transaction. $25,000. Then another one. $18,000. It was not enough to prove anything yet, but it was far too much to dismiss as coincidence. I felt a familiar coldness settle over me. It was not anger. It was the feeling you get when scattered pieces begin forming a picture. Diane did not simply want to keep control of the trust, she might already have been using it. Samuel said we could not draw conclusions until we traced the full source of the money. But he had seen enough to request an emergency audit. He called his assistant and told her to begin preparing the paperwork that morning. I was still in his office when my phone started vibrating, one message from a relative, then another, then 6 missed calls. I opened social media. The video had been posted. It was only 11 seconds long. There was no audio of Diane issuing the challenge. No footage of Tyler putting on his gloves. No part showing Tyler moving toward me first. The video began at the exact moment I moved. It ended with Tyler on the ground. The caption above it said that a veteran who had recently returned home had lost control during a family gathering and attacked the homeowner's son. I watched the number of shares increase. It was not huge, but it was enough. One neighbor commented that they had always worried people returning from war came home with issues. Someone else said Diane should call the police. Before I could put my phone down, Samuel looked through the glass door. 2 police officers were stepping off the elevator. Diane had done exactly what we expected. She struck first. The 2 officers entered the office very politely. They said there had been a report of an assault the night before in Beaver Creek. They needed statements from both me and Tyler. I did not argue. Samuel stood beside me. I told them everything. The agreement, the match, the witnesses, the video. Then Tyler stepped forward. He did not look at me. He looked directly at the 2 officers. It was a consensual match. The room went quiet. Tyler said he had agreed to it, had put on the gloves, and had been the one who moved forward first. He confirmed that Diane had challenged Scarlett to fight him in front of the entire family and had allowed other people to record it. Then he pulled out his phone. He still had the original recording, not the edited clip. The whole thing. From the moment Diane issued the challenge. Every word, every laugh, every second before the bell rang. The 2 officers watched it right there in the office. No one said anything until the video ended. One officer wrote several more lines in his notebook. The other asked Tyler whether he was willing to submit a copy as evidence. He agreed. Then Tyler turned toward Samuel and placed the other USB drive on the desk. I want you to keep this too. That was the first time I understood that Tyler had truly chosen which side he was on. Not my side. Not exactly. He was standing on the side of the truth. And sometimes that was enough to change everything. When the police left, Samuel looked at the stack of papers he had just printed. Then he looked at me. Scarlett, I don't think the video is going to be the biggest problem anymore. He pushed a bank statement toward me. It showed another transaction we had not reviewed yet. $40,000. Withdrawn from the trust 6 months earlier. No invoice, no clear purpose, only one electronic signature. Diane Hayes. I stared at it for a long time. By then, the question was no longer whether Diane was trying to keep my money from me. The question was how much she had already taken. I looked at the $40,000 figure on the statement one more time. Samuel said nothing. Tyler did not either. The only sounds in the office were the steady hum of the air conditioner overhead and the faint rustling of papers from his assistant's desk outside. 10 minutes earlier, I had thought I was trying to protect my right to control the money my father left me. Now I was beginning to understand that I might be trying to save whatever remained of it. Samuel pulled the keyboard closer. We need to start from the beginning. He opened the entire transaction history dating back to the day my father died, one transaction at a time. No guessing. No jumping to conclusions, just following the money. That was how I was used to working. When something happened in the military, especially an incident in which someone was injured, the most dangerous thing you could do was let emotion decide the answer before the evidence appeared. Samuel approached the numbers the same way. The $12,000 withdrawal marked as property maintenance had not gone to a maintenance company. It had been transferred through an intermediary account. From there, $9,500 had been sent to Bennett Performance Group. The $8,500 Diane had labeled as consulting fees followed almost exactly the same path. Then $15,000, $18,000, $25,000. Each individual transaction was small enough not to attract immediate attention from an outsider. But once Samuel placed them side by side, the pattern became obvious. Tyler was standing behind my chair. At first he kept watching the screen. After a few minutes, he pulled out a chair and sat down. I did not have to turn around to know his expression was changing. Samuel opened Bennett Performance Group's business registration records, then compared the dates the gym leased its space, began renovations, and purchased equipment. Everything matched almost perfectly with the withdrawals. Tyler spoke for the first time. My mother told me it was her money. Samuel did not look at him. He kept calculating. 30,000 for flooring renovations and the air conditioning system. 22,000 for training cages, heavy bags, and fitness equipment. 16,000 for the lease deposit. Another payment had gone toward equipment debt. Then came the $40,000 we had just found. Samuel traced it through 2 accounts before the money returned to Tyler's company under the label Private Investment Capital. I looked at the total on the screen, $140,000. Samuel leaned back. He took off his glasses and placed them on the desk. No one needed to say anything else. $140,000 from the inheritance my father had left me had been secretly transferred by Diane into her own son's gym. Tyler stared at the number. I had seen that expression before on people who had just received news their minds were not ready to accept. He did not get angry right away. He did not slam his fist on the desk. He did not swear. He simply sat there. After a moment, Tyler took out his phone, opened his banking app, and scrolled through a series of old transactions. He placed the phone in front of Samuel. The payments Diane had sent him matched the exact dates Samuel had just identified. Tyler spoke very quietly. I asked her where the money came from. Samuel looked up. Tyler explained that 2 years earlier, when he wanted to open his own gym, the bank would not lend him enough. Diane told him she had money from selling some personal investments and was willing to help her son. At first, Tyler refused. Then she convinced him it was an investment in his future, not a gift. He believed her. He signed the lease, bought equipment, hired employees, organized training classes. Step by step, he built a place he believed belonged to him. I looked at Tyler. The night before, he had stepped onto the mat because he thought his mother only wanted to humiliate me. That morning, he discovered that even the work he was most proud of had been built with money taken from me. Some truths do more than change the way people see someone else. They change the way people see their own lives. Tyler stood up and walked toward the window. I left him alone. A minute later, he came back. "How much is the gym worth?" Samuel said he could not know without a formal valuation. Tyler shook his head. "No, I mean if I sold everything." Samuel looked at him for a little longer. "You might not recover the full 140,000. I'll pay the rest." I turned toward him. Tyler looked at me. For the first time since we entered the office, there was no defensiveness left in his voice. All of it. Before I could say anything, he continued, he would transfer ownership of the company, the equipment, the business accounts, the remaining cash. If he had to sell his car, he would sell it. If he had to start over from nothing, he would start over. "I'm not keeping anything that was bought with your money." No one spoke for several seconds. I believed him. Not because Tyler had suddenly become a good man overnight. People did not change that quickly. But he had just lost the thing he was most proud of, and his first reaction was not to protect it. That mattered. Samuel said we should not transfer anything yet. If the gym's assets were connected to money taken from the trust, selling or transferring them on our own could complicate the case. First, he needed to preserve the evidence and obtain a court order. Tyler nodded. Then he pulled a thick folder from his backpack. The lease agreement, equipment invoices, bank statements, employee contracts, tax returns. He had brought nearly all of the gym's financial records with him. "I brought these because I thought you might need them." Samuel looked at the folder. "I need all of it." Tyler placed it on the desk. I should have felt relieved. We had traced $140,000. We had the videos. We had Tyler's statement. We had the records. We had evidence that Diane had tried to manufacture an incident in order to strip me of control over my own assets. But I was not thinking about Diane. I was thinking about Emma. I took out my phone. There was a message from her mother sent more than an hour earlier. The doctors were still holding the treatment slot, but the hospital needed financial confirmation before the final deadline. I looked at the time. Then I called. The conversation lasted only a few minutes. When it ended, I was still holding the phone in my hand. Samuel looked at me. Tyler did too. I asked only one question. How much longer can Emma wait? Samuel understood immediately. He asked what deadline the hospital had given us. Less than 48 hours. The room where we had just found $140,000 suddenly felt meaningless. The money existed, but it was not in my hands. Some of it was tied up in training equipment. Some of it was sitting in business accounts. Some of it might already have been spent. Recovering it legally would take time. The one thing Emma did not have. Samuel stood up. He was no longer speaking like an attorney, explaining documents to a client. He started taking action. His assistant was called in. He instructed her to prepare an emergency petition to freeze every account connected to the trust, the intermediary accounts, and any assets that could be traced back to the transferred funds. He also requested a sworn statement from Tyler that same day. I asked what any of that would do for Emma. Samuel did not avoid the question. It helps us stop any more money from disappearing. And getting the money out? He looked at me. Not as fast as you need it. That was not the answer I wanted to hear. By early afternoon, we left the office and headed to the courthouse in Montgomery County. Samuel had contacted the judge handling emergency trust matters. He said there was no guarantee the court would hear us immediately, but the evidence of the transfers, combined with the recordings and videos showing Diane trying to manufacture a reason to keep control of the trust, might be serious enough. Tyler came with us. On the way down in the elevator, he received 3 calls from Diane. He did not answer. On the 4th call, she sent a message. Tyler read it. He did not reply. I did not ask what it said. By the 5th call, he handed the phone to Samuel. The message contained only one sentence. If you side with her, don't call me your mother anymore. Samuel took a screenshot. Tyler put the phone away. He said nothing. The courthouse looked nothing like the scenes people see on television. There was no packed courtroom, no gavel pounding. We sat in a small hearing room under bright white lights, on hard wooden chairs, with stacks of files arranged across the clerk's desk. The judge was a woman in her late 50s. She read the petition first. Then she reviewed the transaction chart Samuel had prepared. Each withdrawal appeared on its own line. Date withdrawn, reason Diane had listed, receiving account, path of the money, final destination, Bennett Performance Group. The judge asked Tyler whether he knew where the money had come from. He stood. No, Your Honor. She asked where he believed it had come from. My mother's personal assets. Did anyone ever tell you that money belonged to Scarlett Hayes' trust? No. The judge looked back down at the documents. Then she asked whether Tyler was willing to provide all of his business records and refrain from transferring any assets until the court gave permission. Yes. Diane was not there. Her attorney appeared by phone and objected to almost everything. He argued that the transactions were legal, that Diane had the authority to manage investments, that the money put into the gym had been an investment intended to generate returns for the trust. Samuel asked only one question. If it had been an investment by the trust, why was there not a single document showing that the trust owned any equity in Bennett Performance Group? The line went quiet for several seconds. There was no clear answer. Samuel continued. No investment agreement, no ownership percentage, no valuation, no profit reports, no approval record, only money going out. The judge asked to see the video. Samuel played the recording of Diane speaking with Martin. No one in the room said a word when Diane's voice came through. Then I'll give you an incident. The judge watched the entire recording. She showed no emotion. Then she watched the full video of the match. From the moment Diane made the offer, Tyler putting on the gloves, the bell ringing, Tyler moving forward, me taking him down, 5 seconds. Finally, she set the file down. The order was issued that same afternoon. All remaining trust accounts were temporarily frozen. Diane was suspended from her position as trustee while the court reviewed the matter. She was prohibited from withdrawing, transferring, selling, or mortgaging any asset connected to the trust. Bennett Performance Group was also ordered to preserve all assets linked to the disputed funds. An independent trustee would be appointed temporarily. I listened to every word. Legally, it was a major victory. Diane had just lost control of what she had held for 18 months, but when we stepped into the hallway, I did not feel as though I had won anything. I looked at the clock. 36 hours. That was all Emma had left before the hospital deadline. Samuel knew what I was thinking. He explained that freezing the accounts did not mean the money could be transferred to me immediately. The court still had to determine what truly belonged to the trust, what was tied up in business assets, and what could actually be recovered. Even under the best circumstances, the banks and the new trustee would still need time to process everything. I stood beside the hallway window looking down at the street. Cars moved below, people went to work, ate lunch, made phone calls, lived completely ordinary days. In Cincinnati, a 10-year-old girl was lying in a hospital bed waiting for adults to solve a problem with paperwork. Tyler stood a few steps away from me. I can sell my car today. I shook my head. It would not be enough. He said he could take out a loan against the gym. Samuel reminded him that the assets had already been frozen. Tyler went quiet. I did not blame him. He was willing to give up everything. But kindness that comes late still cannot turn back the clock. I called Emma's mother. I told her we had found the money. I did not tell her right away that we could not access it yet, at least not in the first sentence. When I explained, the other end of the line went silent. Then she said the doctors were trying to hold the treatment slot as long as they could. I could hear the faint sound of medical equipment behind her. She was probably standing right beside Emma's bed. Before we hung up, she told me Emma had asked whether I was coming to visit. I closed my eyes. I'll be there. When the call ended, Samuel was standing behind me. He looked at me for a moment, then said he would keep searching for every legal way to move the money faster. I thanked him, but by then, I knew I could not sit in another office. We had beaten Diane at the first step, freezing the accounts, removing her authority, preserving the assets. All of it mattered. But I had learned something on the battlefield a long time ago. Sometimes a plan can be right in every possible way and still arrive too late for the person who needs it. I left the courthouse and went straight to my car. Emma's hospital paperwork was still on the passenger seat, the copy I had printed after Diane tore up the first one. On top was a small photograph. Emma was smiling at the camera, her hair pulled back, both arms wrapped around a golden retriever. I looked at her face, then at the clock. 35 hours. 8 years earlier, when I was lying in the dirt surrounded by dust and chaos, Marcus did not ask whether saving me followed proper procedure. He only saw someone who needed to be brought home. Now his daughter was waiting, and even though the court had just taken control away from Diane, I still did not have the one thing I needed most: time. I left Dayton as the sky began to darken. The drive to Cincinnati was not very far, but that night it felt longer than any drive I could remember. I did not turn on the radio. I did not call Samuel. I did not check Diane's messages. I just drove. Every time I stopped at a red light, I looked at the clock on the dashboard. 33 hours, then 32. I knew I was doing something pointless. Watching the clock would not slow time down. But when people cannot control the thing that matters most, they tend to hold on to the smallest things they can. Cincinnati Children's was brightly lit when I arrived. I had walked into many hospitals in my life. Some were on military bases. Some were nothing more than temporary field treatment areas. The smell of antiseptic was almost the same everywhere. But children's hospitals were always different. There were animals painted on the walls, small chairs in bright colors, a toy train circling the waiting area. Everything was designed to help children forget that they were in a place no child should have to spend too much time. Emma's mother was waiting for me in the fourth-floor hallway. I recognized her before she even said my name. 8 years had changed both of us. Her hair was shorter. Her face was thinner. Deep circles sat under her eyes, the kind that belonged to someone who has gone too many nights without sleep. I stopped a few steps away from her. For years, I had imagined this meeting. Not once had it looked like this. She walked toward me and hugged me. No blame, no questions, just a hug. Somehow that was harder for me than if she had been angry. Emma was asleep when I entered the room. She looked smaller than she did in the photograph I had been staring at for the past several days. A pale blue blanket covered her chest. An intravenous line ran from her arm to the machine beside the bed. I stood at the foot of the bed for a long time. 10 years old. Marcus had missed 8 of his daughter's birthdays, 8 Christmases, her first day of school, the first tooth she lost. Small things people rarely understand are precious until they no longer have the chance to see them. Emma's mother sat down in the chair beside the window. I told her the trust had been frozen. I told her Samuel had found the money Diane had transferred. I told her we were doing everything we could. I did not promise the money would arrive in time. I had lived long enough to know that promises you may not be able to keep only make the pain arrive later. She listened to everything. Then she simply nodded. Marcus would know you tried. I looked at her. It was such a simple sentence, but I could not accept it. Not after 8 years. I walked closer to the window. Outside, the lights of the city stretched beneath the dark sky. I never told you what happened that day. She did not ask what I meant. Maybe she already knew I needed to say it myself. I told her about the day Marcus was killed. Not the version written in the report. Not the short lines written in military language. I told her the part I had kept to myself. Before the convoy moved out that morning, I had noticed several things about the route that made me uneasy. Not enough to prove there was danger, not enough to stop the mission, but enough to make me ask questions. The person in charge confirmed that the route had been checked. I trusted that assessment. We moved forward. When the ambush happened, a soldier was wounded right in front of us. I left cover too early to reach him. Marcus saw something I did not. He rushed toward me. He pushed me down. And after that, he never came home. In the official report, no one said I had made a mistake. The investigation concluded that my actions were consistent with my duties as a combat medic. My commanders said Marcus had made his own decision. I heard all of it, but I never fully believed it. For 8 years, I've still believed that if I had waited a few more seconds that day, he would still be alive. That was the first time I had ever said those words out loud. Emma's mother looked at me for a long time. Then she stood. She took a small box from the drawer beside the hospital bed. Inside was a metal chain, 2 dog tags. Marcus Reed's name was still clearly stamped into them. I did not reach for them. She placed them in my palm. They sent these back with his belongings. I looked down at the pieces of metal. 8 years earlier, they had rested against Marcus's chest. My throat tightened. Emma's mother told me Marcus had written to her a few weeks before his final mission. In that letter, he talked about the people in his unit. I was one of them. He said I was always trying to save everyone, even when it meant forgetting to protect myself. Then she said something that made it impossible for me to look at her. He knew you would run toward the wounded. That's why he was always watching out for you. I tightened my hand around the dog tags. All those years, I had treated Marcus's choice as the consequence of a mistake I had made. But to him, maybe it had been simpler than that. He saw one of his people in danger, and he acted, just like any other day. Emma shifted in the bed. I turned around. Her eyes opened slightly. Her mother stepped closer. Emma looked at me, still exhausted. Miss Scarlett? I did not know how she recognized me. Maybe her mother had shown her a picture. I moved closer. I'm here. Emma gave me the faintest smile. Then she closed her eyes again. I sat down in the chair beside the bed, Marcus's dog tag still in my hand. My phone vibrated. Samuel. I looked at the screen for a few seconds before answering. His voice sounded completely different this time. Faster. Scarlett? Are you still at the hospital? Yes. Don't go anywhere. I stood up. What happened? Samuel explained that after the court suspended Diane's authority, the independent trustee ordered an inventory of every document connected to the trust and my father's estate. That included the old safe in the Beaver Creek house. The same safe I had always assumed contained only insurance papers and a few of my father's personal belongings. Diane claimed she no longer knew the combination. A locksmith was called. Inside were 3 folders, one with my name on it, one related to my father's company, and the third labeled Marcus Reed Family Emergency Trust. I could not say anything. Samuel continued. My father had established it nearly 7 years earlier, about a year after Marcus was killed. He knew the whole story. I remembered telling my father about Marcus during one trip home to Ohio. I had not said much, only that a soldier had saved my life and left behind a wife and a little girl. I had never known what my father had done afterward. Samuel explained that the emergency trust had been established separately, using my father's personal money. It was not part of my inheritance. It had nothing to do with my turning 35. It did not require me to prove that I was capable of managing assets. The beneficiaries were clearly named, the wife and daughter of Sergeant Marcus Reed. The trust was designed to pay for medical care, education, or emergency needs for Marcus's family. The current balance was enough to cover the full cost of the treatment Emma needed. I sat down. Emma's mother looked at me, but I still could not speak. There was one more question. Did Diane know? Samuel was silent for 2 seconds. Then he answered. Yes, he had just found an acknowledgement form bearing Diane's signature. My father had asked her to sign as the backup record holder after he began having heart problems. Diane did not simply know the trust existed. She knew who it was for. She knew why it had been created. And when I walked into that house asking for money to save Emma, she already knew there was another trust that could solve the problem without touching a single dollar of my inheritance. She stayed silent anyway. She still made me fight Tyler. She still tore up the paperwork in front of the whole family. I looked at Emma sleeping. For the first time since all of this began, I did not feel angry. I simply understood Diane in an entirely different way. She had not held the money because of procedure. She had not held it because she was worried I might spend it recklessly. She knew a child needed help, and she deliberately hid the path that could save her. Samuel said he was sending the documents to the independent trustee and the hospital. Because this trust was completely separate, the distribution process could begin immediately. I looked at the clock. Less than 30 hours remained. Time was still moving, but for the first time, we had found a way to move faster than it. I ended the call. Emma's mother stood in front of me. I opened my hand. Marcus's dog tags rested in my palm. Then I said something I had never imagined I would have the chance to tell his family. My father left a trust for Emma. She did not understand at first. I had to say it again. This time, her tears began falling before I could finish. I looked toward the little girl in the bed. Marcus had saved me 8 years earlier. My father, in a way I had never known, had tried to make sure that if Marcus's family ever needed saving in return, we would not arrive too late. And finally, I began to understand that maybe the debt I had carried for 8 years was never something I was meant to repay alone. What happened after that moved faster than I expected. The next morning, the hospital confirmed that my father's emergency trust had been reviewed and approved for distribution. Samuel worked directly with the independent trustee, while the financial department at Cincinnati Children's completed the rest. Emma kept her treatment appointment. When her mother called me, she managed only a few words before she started crying. I did not know what to say. I simply sat in my car outside the hospital, both hands resting on the steering wheel, watching people walk past the windshield. 3 days earlier, I had been standing in Diane's backyard, turned into entertainment in exchange for a signature. Now that signature no longer mattered. But what Diane had done still did. Samuel submitted the entire file to the court. The money withdrawn from my trust. The $140,000 transferred into Bennett Performance Group. The video Diane had prepared in advance to make me look out of control. The audio recording of her conversation with the attorney. And most importantly, the documents proving that she knew the trust for Marcus's family existed and deliberately hid it. From that point forward, this was no longer just a family dispute. Diane came under investigation for mismanaging trust assets, concealing documents, and transferring money into a business that provided no benefit to the trust. I did not follow every step. I did not need to. Tyler did something that surprised me. He signed every document necessary to allow the independent trustee to value the portion of the gym purchased with trust money. Tyler did not argue that he had worked hard to build it. He did not demand to keep part of it first. He said only one thing to Samuel. "If it isn't mine, I'm giving it back." The gym did not shut down immediately. The court allowed it to keep operating while the matter was being resolved, so the employees would not suddenly lose their jobs, but ownership and revenue were placed under supervision. Tyler turned over every book, account, and contract to the investigator. He could lose almost everything. But for the first time, I felt Tyler was building something more important than a gym. His own self-respect. Diane called me twice. I did not answer. Later, she left a long voicemail saying that everything had gone too far, that I was destroying the family over money. I deleted it. Not because I was angry. I simply had nothing left to say. Diane had tried to create evidence showing that I was dangerous. In the end, that same video proved she had planned the entire thing. She tried to keep control of the trust by making me look unstable. In the end, that plan caused the court to remove her as trustee. She used Tyler to bring me down. In the end, Tyler became the person who handed over the evidence against her. I did not need revenge. The truth had done that job better than I ever could. A few months later, I returned to Cincinnati Children's. This time, the hallways did not make it hard for me to breathe. Emma was doing better. She still needed follow-up care and continued treatment, but the color had returned to her face, her voice was stronger, and her eyes no longer looked as exhausted as they had the first time I saw her. We sat in the small garden behind the hospital. I had brought Marcus's dog tags with me. I had kept them through those months. Not because I wanted to keep a part of him, I simply had not known whether I was ready to give them back. Emma looked at the chain in my hand. I placed it in her palm. "These belong to you." Emma stared at her father's name, stamped into the metal for a long time. Then she looked up at me. "My dad saved you so you could come home." I did not answer right away. One sentence from a 10-year-old girl had done what 8 years of therapy, official reports, and hundreds of sleepless nights had never managed to do. It made me see the story differently. For 8 years, I had believed I was living with the part of life Marcus had lost. That was why I always felt indebted to him. I thought that debt had to be paid with guilt, by never forgetting the day he was killed, by blaming myself every time I thought about Emma. But Marcus had not saved me so I could spend the rest of my life punishing myself. He saved me so I could come home, so I could keep living, keep helping people, keep doing what he had done that day. I watched Emma place her father's dog tags around her neck. For the first time in 8 years, when I thought about Marcus, I no longer saw only the moment he could not come home. I saw the reason I had been able to come home. And I understood that the debt had never needed to be repaid through suffering. It only needed to be carried forward through courage, kindness, and refusing to leave behind someone who needed help, just as Marcus had never left me behind. Through everything that happened, I learned that real strength is not about winning a fight or making the person who hurt you pay. Real strength is the ability to stay calm when you are insulted, defend the truth when you are falsely accused, and still choose to do the right thing even when you have every reason to be angry. I also learned that kindness is not weakness. Marcus saved me through courage, my father quietly helped his family through gratitude, and Tyler ultimately chose to return what did not belong to him. Life may place selfish people and unfair circumstances in our path, but we still have the right to choose what kind of person we will become. Do not let pain turn into hatred. Let it become a reason to live with more kindness, more strength, and a greater willingness to protect the people who need you. Thank you for listening to my story. Please subscribe and continue supporting the channel.